Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Energize Your Online Business podcast. Hey there, Kate.
Hello.
Hello. I'm excited for this episode because this is a topic that I really I kind of geek out over because there's so many different things that you can do, so many different things that you can learn. I'm really looking forward to digging into this.
Yes, me too. And we should say, I'm going to just say what it is. We're talking about testing today and tests that you can actually run right now. Not all of them at once, obviously, but ones that you can run right now and hopefully will immediately have an impact on your metrics in hopefully a positive way. But if not, the beauty of testing is you can continue to test to butch things up. That's the technical term we use here to move them in the right direction. And we should say too that testing, this is one of the best reasons not to live launch, because live launch, you have to wait to your next launch to test something out. And it's really hard to A/B test with a live launch. You don't actually know, the variables are all different. Whereas if you are testing as you go and selling, every single day, you can get data every single day that helps you improve your numbers. So it's really, we run a ton of tests here. So it's our favorite.
Yes. And it's always interesting to see what the test reveals. There's so many times that we think, ooh, this test is going to have a major impact. And the control one won. We tried something we thought was going to be amazing. And it's just, you can never know, which is why testing is so important. And there are a myriad of tests that you can run in any area of your business, because we don't quite frankly have hours and hours. We're going to limit ourselves to 5. And for this episode, we're going to talk about emails. In upcoming episodes, a little bit further down the line, so make sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss them. We'll talk about testing in other areas of your business. But for right now, we're going to talk specifically about emails. One thing I do want to talk a little bit about first is if you are new to testing, if you in the past, you've kind of just moved forward and put your best foot forward, of course, that's great. But the nice thing about testing is it gives you the opportunity to, as Kate said, butch up your results, make everything just a little bit better. You heard Kate mention the term A/B testing, and that's what we're going to really focus on here. When we talk about A/B testing, we talk about testing one variable against another, testing one variable in 2 different emails. And we'll talk about exactly, obviously, what those variables will be in a moment. But, let's just say our first one we'll talk about is subject lines. And so in this case, in an A/B test, or sometimes called a split test, you are keeping everything about the email the same except for the subject line. So the subject line is different in both emails, but everything else in the body of the emails, the from line, all of that stuff is exactly the same. And what that lets you do is it lets you be absolutely certain that it was the subject line that had the impact. Whereas if you made changes to the subject line, you made changes to the picture, you made change maybe to the from line, maybe to colors in the email, all that kind of thing, you can't be sure what it was that actually had the positive impact, or quite frankly, had the negative impact. That can happen certainly as well. But when you test one variable at a time, yes, you have to move a little bit slower, but it is so much more deliberate and it allows you to have much better results over time. If you test your subject line and you get a little bit of an increase, you do all these other tests that we're going to talk about today and you get a little bit of an increase with each one. At the end, you can be having a major impact on the results of your emails. So
yeah. And the other nice thing too, as you test just one variable, you'll have more intentional hypotheses for how to continue to test and move things up. Whereas if you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and then you're like, well, this improved things, how can you improve it? For what do you test next? You don't want to change the copy and the design and this and that's, and then have no idea what's actually moving the needle. And so I hate that phrase, but what's actually making a difference for your business. And so you can have, if using subject lines as an example, again, maybe you are using a lot of questions in your subject lines and that's not actually increasing open rates, then maybe that's your hypothesis. Okay, my audience isn't responding to things that are phrased as a question. That might not actually be, it, but something you have these better ideas for where to go next and for where to test next to move those numbers up.
Exactly. So, like we said, the first thing that you can be testing is subject lines, and there are many different things that you can test within the subject lines.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the first ones that's a go-to is testing a benefit-oriented subject line,
Mm-hmm.
what they're going to get out of opening the email, versus testing a subject line that maybe piques their curiosity a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You have to still make it detailed enough so that they understand why they should open that email, why why it pertains to them. Certainly, you can't just put something in there like, this crazy thing happened to me yesterday. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about this crazy thing happened to me. But this crazy thing happened to me, and here's how it will reduce your cost per lead.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's something that's interesting. And again, you're getting a little bit of a benefit, but you're really kind of piquing their interest versus a subject line that says maybe the top 5 ways to reduce your cost per lead, something like that. So benefit oriented versus interest piquing can be a great test to run.
Mm-hmm.
And like Kate said, maybe questions versus statements
Mm-hmm.
can be something to test. You can test out putting people's names in and personalizing their names, and test out personalizing. And obviously, you don't want to personalize every single subject line, but maybe there are certain subject lines that are especially important for people to open. Maybe you want to test out the length of your subject lines. Maybe you want to test out putting emojis in your subject
Mm-hmm.
lines here or there. There are lots of different things that you can test. And one of the reasons that, actually, really the main reason that we put this first on our list to talk about, is subject lines are so crucial.
It's the number one most crucial piece of your email.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the irony is that so many people leave the subject line to the end, right? They write the email first, they put in some effort, and they go, oh, I just have to put together the subject line. And they just kind of make it a throwaway thing. But the subject line is crucial, because if your subject line doesn't get someone to open your email, then all of the rest of your email doesn't matter at all. You could have the most incredible body of your email in there, but if your subject line doesn't get them to open, if they click delete based on your subject line, then it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what's in the rest of your email.
Yeah. And this might sound like a silly test too, but another one that you can do is test the capitalization. Do you capitalize every single word in the subject line, or just the initial first word of the subject line? And if you're listening to this and think that's ridiculous, that can actually make a difference, which is just wild, of what stands out in someone's inbox, what people are drawn to. So that's another one worth testing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for the subject line, what we're looking at metric wise is the open rate. That's really the only thing that the subject line is impacting. The body of your email, and we'll get to that. There are other metrics you want to look at for click through rate and whatnot that the body impacts. But subject line is just the open rate that you're looking at.
Then, of course, once people open up your email, another thing that you can test is the first line of your email.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, well, but I have a different first line of my email every time I send an email, we're talking specifically about the emails that you are sending regularly. So your automated emails.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a welcome sequence, our CSS students know that the circuit is all automated, which makes it that much easier to test and see an impact, because people are opening up these emails every single day, and you can immediately do a split test to see, oh, okay, in my fast action sequence, this first line does so much better than this first line. And a lot of people call the first line the hook. And the purpose of that is because you're trying to hook people's interest. You've gotten their interest enough to open the email, but just because they've opened it doesn't mean that you're going to keep that interest.
Yeah. Kind of after the subject line is the next most important piece of copy, really, to know, are they going to read the rest? Are they going to get to my call to action? Because you could, again, have the best call to action. You could have the best meat in your email. But if that first line isn't grabbing their attention, they might delete it right after that as well. So thinking of each stage of this email as an opportunity to really keep engaging your customers.
Exactly. And that first line can really be a great way to start paying off what you promised in the beginning of that, or in your subject line, I should say. It can start, because when I say paying off, I mean giving them the details of whether it's the benefit or whether it's however you pique their interest. Start giving them the details. And I think as business owners, sometimes we get so wrapped up in our own business, in our own writing, that we can just assume that what we find interesting is going to be something that everybody finds interesting. So we always encourage you, when you are writing, to take a moment, write your draft out. Absolutely. Take a step back. Maybe go do some laundry, do another project, something else for work, or take a walk around the block, whatever, but give yourself a little bit of distance and then come back and look at your copy objectively. Imagine it's showing up in your inbox. You clicked on that subject line to read it. Is that first line genuinely going to make you keep reading? Or is it going to make you go, again, technical term. Yeah.
And we should say too, before we get too far into this, in terms of the metrics and when you're testing, I know we've talked about this before, but having enough results to actually measure whether the test is effective. So if you are sending an email and it's only going to 50 people, that might not be, and that's not enough to really tell if your test, what's going on with your test. Now, if you split 25-25 and all 25 opened one and only one person opened the other, okay, maybe there's enough data there. But typically I like to say, at least 100 people in terms of opening. So if you're doing a split test with 200 people and you have 100 and 100 in each group, that might give you a little bit more of a sense of what if something's working or not.
Yeah. And your email software should allow you to split test within the software. It should have systems for how to split test. I don't think I'm aware of any email software that doesn't do that nowadays. Yeah. And they will also tell you when you get to statistical significance, which basically means the email software says, we've done the analysis and this is enough people to be really sure that these are the results. And this is the one that won. So you, to your point, Kate, you absolutely have to have enough people through there, but also don't forget to rely on your email software and look at the numbers that it's showing you.
Yeah. And there are a lot of I don't even want to say clever. There are a lot of people try to go too far sometimes in the call to action with incorporating their brand voice or getting, I was going to say clever, but cutesy, fun, trying to do too much with it in the sense of, so some examples I'm thinking of, like, give me the goods, or, and I think that's another example of, am I paying for this? Is it free? Is it, maybe you made it clear in the copy, but even if, don't assume that people read the copy. They might've read your headline and said, yeah, I want this, gone to the call to action. So they might miss what's in between or forget, or you could say it 5 different times and people are still going to forget some of the key details that you think are really important and people would remember, but you'd be really surprised at what people don't retain. And so we can't assume that people are going in and know everything that we know, or that they know what's coming next and what's on that next page. We have the omnipotence as the business owners of knowing that whole flow of, okay, they went from here and now they're here and now they're here. That person might not remember all of that. Like, in fact, they're not going to remember it like we do. And so really simplifying it for them, and making, and frankly, starting your call to action typically with an action of what it is that you want them to do. Yeah, you want to use a verb. You want to, learn, get, save, obviously with more copy after that to explain what it is. But, I think sometimes it's, I want this. I don't know that that's a call. That's not an action. I want this. Yes. But people might not know then to click, even if it's underlined with a URL, even if it's a button. Depending on your audience, they might not be savvy enough to know that I want this as your call to action and they're supposed to do something with that.
Exactly. And if you're listening to this and going, but I have give me the goods as my call to action and people click on it, then test it.
Test it.
Great. Yeah. Test it against something else. You might discover that give me the goods wins. Awesome. But I will say that there are 2 metrics that you need to look at. Number 1, you do need to look at click-through rate. But number 2, you need to look at bounce rate. And bounce rate is the percentage of people who get to a page and then immediately leave. And generally, this is kind of a wide generalization, but generally when there's a high bounce rate, it's because people getting to a page that's not what they expected it to be, and then they immediately leave. And it could be that some call to actions, like Kate was saying, some of the more quote unquote fun ones, or the less specific ones, people might assume they're getting something else, get to a page. They might click through, because they assume they're getting something else,
Yeah.
but they click through to a page and they immediately leave. If, for example, but if get me the goods, if throughout your email, they've been thinking that get me the goods means they're going to get something free, and they click through and it's actually a sales page, they're going to leave very, very quickly. So keep an eye not just on your click-through rate, but also on your bounce rate. And your bounce rate is something that you'll be able to take a look at on your landing page software, whatever that is. Okay, next thing that you can test. We talked about your call to action, obviously, and usually unless your call to action is something like keep your eyes out for the next email, which it absolutely could be, your call to action is often going to have a link associated with it. It's a page that you're sending them to, or it's a podcast platform you're sending them to, or it's a booking page you're sending them to, whatever. But it's going to have a link associated with it. You can also test the placement of that CTA, the placement of that link within your email. I think a lot of us tend to, we tell them the whole story, and then at the end we say, okay, go here to do this. But maybe there are opportunities to put that link further up. For example, if you name your program, or if you talk about the name of your program, and at the end you're going to tell people to purchase it, and you link buy XYZ program here. If earlier in the email you say, in my program, XYZ program, maybe that could be a link as well. Testing the number of links in an email, and testing the placement where in the email you have those links.
Yeah. And to that point, you typically want to have one call to action in the email. Maybe you have a secondary one later if you have different things that you're talking about, like in a newsletter, for example, you might have multiple. But if you're focused on using the program example, you want to kind of keep that link the same in each place and not be sending people to different areas and mixing messages within that email.
That's a great point. Yeah. What is the purpose of that email? Absolutely. Yeah. That's where you're going to be sending them to. Yeah.
And I think with all of these tests too, it's what works for you might not work for someone else. And so I think a lot of the lists that you see companies coming out with of like, these are the best subject lines that get the most opens, or this is the copy, the best call to actions. And you can certainly test all of that. Absolutely. Why not? But you might find that just because it's made one of these top lists of like, these are what works, that it doesn't actually work for you. And I think that's important to remember with everything. This is why we test. Because even, if there are roundups within your specific industry, it might not be relevant to you still.
Well, and I think too, as soon as everybody starts saying, well, this is what works, when everybody starts doing it, then it doesn't break you out of the mold anymore. I have been in the marketing industry for long enough that I can talk about like the beginning of email marketing. And I just remember being a copywriter and people always saying, oh, well, find out what's the exact right character count. What's the best character count to get open rates? And first of all, it was always changing because again, as soon as everyone was like, oh, 40, aim for 40, then the longer ones were the ones that stood out in the inbox.
It was always 60.
Exactly. Then when everybody's doing longer ones and the shorter ones stood out in the inbox. So that's part of why testing is so important, because it's going to help you make choices based on what your audience wants and what your audience needs and will respond to, versus what the capital T they tell you that you quote unquote need to be doing.
Yeah, especially when there's so many email providers now, so many phone, tablet, desktop, and responsive design. The character count is going to be different on everyone's device. So don't drive yourself too nuts trying to figure out what's going to work. Just test it.
And our last one for this roundup, although I think we have more stuff we could talk about.
So many tests,
we might have to do a part 2. Yes. Is content within your email. We already talked about the hook and then, but one specific piece of content, and that is testimonials. Do test including a testimonial within your emails. And it could be a testimonial. Maybe it's within a sales sequence you want to include a testimonial, but even just client stories, short little client stories can be fantastic within your weekly newsletter, because you want people to catch you. They tend to catch people's attention, and you want to catch their attention and have them understand how fantastic you and your program are.
Yeah, and some tests within the test of testing testimonials. It's a lot of tests. You can do actual screen grabs if you have, someone emailed you about your program or Facebook group or whatever it is. And for us, we tend to blur out people's last names just for privacy purposes. But you can test the actual image in the email. You could test putting that into text and having their photo. You could test it without a photo and just a name with a quote. You could test the specific testimonial. So I would recommend, if you are testing these different design treatments of it, so screen grab, with or without a photo, just text with a name, keeping that as the same testimonial for whoever you're using for that, to test if the design makes an impact. And then once you say, okay, out of all of these, the screen grab performed the best. Okay, now I'm going to test a different screen grab against this testimonial. So 2 different testimonials. Does this message of this testimonial outweigh this other one? And so being a little bit, again, intentional with the way you're testing the design versus the message of that specific testimonial.
Yeah. And I cannot I cannot second that point enough, Kate, because sometimes too what we think is going to be a testimonial that gets people to take action is not. For example, let's say you teach you're a business coach and you teach a program that helps people increase their revenue. You might have a testimonial in there from someone, a star student who says, I was making $100,000 a year last year, and this year we made $6 million, which is an amazing testimonial, right? But there may be people in your target audience, and maybe it's most of your target audience, who finds that $6 million is so aspirational that it's just completely out of their realm of understanding. And it almost pushes them away because they're not in a place where they can even conceive of getting to $6 million. So you might, if you tested that against someone who said, I made $100,000 last year and I doubled my revenue. I made $200,000 this year, and it was easier than I would have ever believed. Yes, is the number less exciting? Absolutely, it is. $6 million versus 200,000, certainly. However, your target audience might feel like 200,000, doubling their revenue, is much more doable for them, and they're more likely to want to work with you. So it's, I think, something that we are always cautioning, actually all of our students across all of our brands and probably each other as well, is to never make assumptions. It would be very easy to assume that it's a $6 million testimonial that's going to win. Everybody's going to love it. Like we said, your target audience, we are constantly being surprised by what wins in our tests.
Yeah. My joke is always now, the one that I assume is going to win, I'm like, okay, that I think that's just going to win. So I think the other one now is going to win. I just know to go the opposite way now.
We should start an in-office betting pool.
Right. I'd be broke. That's what would happen. But I think with testimonials too, to your point, it might not even be a revenue thing that moves people. It might be, I used to work 60 hours a week and now I'm working 15, and that might be more what resonates with people. It might not even be, a revenue thing that moves, or maybe it's both in different areas of your sequence. So testing what actually is compelling to people. Because again, I feel like what's compelling to me is never what's compelling to our audience. I'm just unique. That's what that tells me.
That's you. You're a special star. You are. But never make assumptions.
Yes.
Test
everything,
but also test things one at a time, and give the tests enough time to actually you'll never be 100% certain, but you can get really, really close when it comes to which test is actually winning and then what you should move forward with. Like we said, we are constantly testing just about everything and across our brands. And the great thing about a test is that it can say like, well, I only increased the open rate like 2%. But you know what? When you're sending thousands of people through over the course of a year, and that's 2% of people who might work out to be, I don't know, a couple hundred more people, a couple thousand more people, those people have the opportunity to get to your sales page. And that it's tiny little incremental changes can have big impacts on your revenue. Okay, so like we said, this is the first one in a series. We'll have more coming up. Definitely hit subscribe or hit follow or whatever they call it now to make sure that you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. And with that, we will catch you in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do you want to learn how to sell and scale your offer on autopilot every single day without the chaos of live launching or the low conversions of Evergreen? Who doesn't, right? Get our free on-demand video training at circuitsalessystem.com/free. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel to make sure you never miss a video. We'll catch you next time.